Turn your note page over to page 2. We're going to now look at how to name and write formulas for covalent compounds. First thing we need to remember is with covalent compounds, we're not having any metals. We'll get to metals later when we do ionic naming and formula writing. And hydrogen will never be first. Again, when we get to hydrogen being first, that'll be naming and writing formulas for acids. Also, when we're dealing with covalent compounds, we can only have 2 elements. I can have multiple atoms of each element, but I can only have 2 different elements for my covalent compounds. When I name covalent compounds, I have to use prefixes. These are on your periodic table packet on the very back, on the same side where you have your metric prefixes and your polyatomic ions that we'll use later on. Those prefixes in the top right corner are only used for covalent naming. And those prefixes tell us how many atoms of each element there are in the compound. So take a minute and find that on your periodic table. Now to use these prefixes, we're going to use them to name 2 different words in our compound. The covalent naming of compounds has 2 words. The first word is for the first element, and the second word is for the second element. The first word has the numerical prefix in front, unless it would be mono, in which case there's no prefix used for the first word. Then the rest of the name that follows the prefix is the name of the first element in the formula, unchanged. So if I have CO2 as in our first example, there's 1 carbon atom. Since there's 1, I drop the mono, no mono, and I just say carbon. The second word uses the numerical prefix, no matter what it is, including mono, if it is mono. And then I have the stem of the name of the second element, and I end it in IDE. So in this case, I have 2 oxygens. 2 I replace with di, di. The stem of oxygen is ox, so diox, and then I end it with IDE, ide. So CO2 is, as you know, carbon dioxide. We're going to use these same rules to name these other compounds. So let's look at the rest of our examples. SF6. There's 1 S, so we don't use the mono prefix. We just say sulfur. And after sulfur, we have 6 fluorines. The prefix for 6 is hexa. And the stem for fluorine is the fluor, F-L-U-O-R, and then I change the ending to ide, I-D-E. So sulfur hexafluoride. The next example, I have 2 nitrogens. Now that it's not 1, I do need the prefix. No prefix suggests 1 automatically. Here, because there's 2 nitrogens, I need to say di-nitrogen. And I have 1 oxygen. Since it's the second word, I do need mono. And then my stem is ox. Since I already have an O there, we drop that O from the mono, so I get mon, and then OX for my stem. And then the ending is ide. So we get monoxide. Dinitrogen monoxide. The next one on your list is this one here at the bottom, ASF3. AS is arsenic. There's only one of them, so we just write arsenic. And then there's 3 fluorines. 3 gets the prefix tri. Fluorine, stem is fluor. And then instead of fluorine, we get fluoride. So that's going from formulas to names. Now let's go the other way. boron mononitride. Boron is just boron, which is capital B. And then, since there's no prefix, I know there's one of those, so I can write it over here as part of my answer. And then mononitride. The "ide" is just my ending, so I'm looking for the element that has the stem nitri, and that is nitrogen. And then mono tells me there's one, so this is BN, capital B, capital N. Going on to the next one, I have tetraphosphorus decoxide. I recognize phosphorus as my element, capital P. Tetra is my prefix meaning 4, so there's 4 phosphorus atoms. And then the decoxide, ox is my stem for oxygen, so capital O. Dec is from deca. A got dropped because of the oxygen that followed. So deca means 10. Okay. And you'll notice with these stems, especially with oxygen, if there's an O or an A vowel that follows an O or A, so from deca, mono, etc., that extra O gets dropped from the prefix. And the last one, carbon, capital C, no prefix means mono. Selenide is for selenium, Se. Di tells me there's 2 of those. Take a minute to look over those. And you'll see in the other sheet you picked up, this is a summary of all of our naming and formula writing things we're going to be getting to. Today we just focused on covalent. So we're looking at identifying them up here. And we also looked at identifying the other 2. So this is something we looked at today, is identifying these. And then naming, we looked at this part of the chart here. Later in the week, we'll look at how to name and write formulas for ionic and acids. So as a quick overview, if we're identifying by formula, acids have H first, ionic compounds have a metal or NH4 first, and covalent compounds have a nonmetal other than NH4 or hydrogen, or a metalloid first. For identifying by name, acids have acid at the end of the name, a metal name or the word ammonium first, no prefixes, and covalent has a nonmetal or metalloid first in the name, and they do have prefixes. There's no acid in the name. For naming covalent, we have 2 names. The first element has any prefix except for mono, followed by the name of the element unchanged. The second word uses a prefix every time, and the ending of the element name ends in IDE. There is a backside to your worksheet. Make sure you flip it over and work on that for homework. You need to do questions 1 through 8 for both sections for homework, 9 through 16 for both sections, or for your extra practice. I do suggest doing those as well.